War expands across region. US submarine sinks Iranian warship near Sri Lanka amid escalating Middle East conflict. The escalating war between the United States, Israel, and Iran took a dramatic turn on Wednesday when a US submarine carried out a strike that sank an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka, according to three US officials. Now it's time to go in detail and uncover the full story in today's AI podcast.
Welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you're here. So today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. And if you've been watching the geopolitical landscape fracture over the last, few days, we are in the middle of a historic paradigm shift.
A massive one. Yeah.
Right. So our mission today is to really cut through the noise. We are taking a stack of highly critical sources, primarily a comprehensive intelligence and strategic briefing.
Titled The Indian Ocean Escalation, Globalizing the Iran-Israel War.
Exactly. We're looking at that alongside some major breaking dispatches from Reuters, and we are going to synthesize the facts for you.
Because there is just so much information flying around right now.
There really is.
Yeah,
we want to help you understand the sheer scale of a global conflict that is, frankly, mutating by the hour.
But before we jump into the timeline, let's quickly establish the parameters of our discussion today.
Good idea.
We are looking at a highly volatile, ongoing military war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. Because of the politically charged nature of these events, it is absolutely crucial to state that we are not taking any sides.
Right. Zero sides.
Our objective is strictly to impartially report on the factual content provided in these briefings. We aren't endorsing any military actions, political statements, or viewpoints of any kind.
We are simply here to give you an unbiased, analytical picture of the situation exactly as it has been documented in the sources.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because day 5 of this war has just shattered the geographical boundaries we typically associate with this conflict.
It really have.
We are no longer just looking at the Middle East. Let's start with the breaking news from Reuters.
This is the big one.
Yeah. According to 3 separate U.S. officials, a United States submarine has carried out a strike that successfully sank an Iranian warship.
What's fascinating here is the specific geography of that strike.
Yeah, talk about that.
The engagement didn't happen in the Persian Gulf. It wasn't in the Red Sea. It wasn't anywhere near the Arabian Peninsula.
Right.
It happened off the coast of Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, which is just, that's a massive distance.
It is. We are looking at the very first known U.S. naval engagement outside of the Persian Gulf since this conflict began.
Wow.
It's a massive projection of the theater of war into the wider Indian Ocean.
But strategically, why is an Iranian warship operating all the way down by Sri Lanka on day 5 of a hot war?
It's a great question.
Right. And why dedicate a U.S. submarine to it there? It seems like a massive diversion of assets from the primary theater.
Well, it speaks to the broader maritime strategy at play here. Iran has been actively trying to project blue water naval capabilities for years,
Okay.
often using forward-based ships or even converted commercial vessels.
For what? Like intelligence?
Intelligence gathering, logistics, or even drone deployment far from their shores.
Oh, I see.
Having an asset near the sea lane south of India allows a nation to monitor or disrupt Indo-Pacific transit.
So they were watching the traffic.
Likely, yes. And from the U.S. perspective, neutralizing that vessel off Sri Lanka sends a very definitive message. Which is that there is no sanctuary in the open ocean.
Yeah.
If you are a belligerent vessel, the threat envelope is global.
But the human and logistical fallout from this strike was immediate.
Yes.
And it fell entirely on a neutral party. The briefing details that the Sri Lankan Navy had to trigger an emergency rescue operation.
In their own waters.
Right, in their own waters. They successfully pulled dozens of Iranian sailors from the sinking vessel.
Which is a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. Think about the diplomatic and logistical tightrope a neutral nation has to walk in that exact moment.
It is a nightmare scenario for Colombo.
I can imagine.
You have a neutral navy suddenly dealing with a mass casualty event in its exclusive economic zone.
Yeah.
They have to mobilize their own fleet, conduct triage, and then this is the hard part, figure out the diplomatic protocol of holding combatants from a foreign war.
It proves that when superpowers clash in the open ocean, the operational burden often falls on the closest bystander.
Precisely.
We're also dealing with some glaring omissions in the public data.
Yes, very noticeable ones.
Right. The Reuters report explicitly states that the class of the U.S. submarine involved is unknown.
Unknown.
As is the specific class of the Iranian warship.
That ambiguity is highly deliberate.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The U.S. Navy operates different platforms in the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah.
If this was a Virginia-class fast-attack submarine, we're likely talking about a Mark 48 torpedo strike.
Okay.
But if it was an Ohio-class guided missile sub, it could have been a different operational profile altogether.
And on the Iranian side?
Well, whether this was a smaller frigate or a massive Macron-class floating base that completely changes the strategic weight of the sinking.
Right.
The fact that the Pentagon is withholding those specifics tells us they are strictly protecting their operational intelligence regarding what assets they have deployed in the Indian Ocean.
Makes sense. And while the maritime map is being redrawn in the deep ocean, the terrestrial choke points are actively being squeezed.
Very much so.
On the exact same day as the strike off Sri Lanka, Tehran made a sweeping declaration.
A huge one.
They announced they have taken full military control over the Strait of Hormuz.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see a coordinated effort to weaponize maritime geography.
Yes.
The Strait of Hormuz is the central artery for global energy markets. Taking strict military authority over it, as the sources quote, isn't just a localized tactical move.
No.
It is a global economic lever.
Right. I mean, you know how vital Hormuz is to the global economy. Everyone feels it.
Yes, at the gas pump, in shipping costs, everywhere.
But I want to look at the mechanics of this. How does Tehran actually operationalize and enforce strict military authority over such a heavily trafficked corridor practically overnight?
Well, they don't need a massive traditional naval blockade to do it.
They don't.
No. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, relies heavily on asymmetric warfare.
Okay, break that down for us.
They operationalize control through a combination of fast attack craft swarms, the deployment of smart sea mines right into the shipping lanes, and locking in coastal defense cruise missiles along the shoreline.
So they just wired the whole area.
Exactly. They only need to demonstrate the capability to destroy a commercial tanker to effectively close the strait.
Because once that threat is credible, the global shipping apparatus just freezes.
Precisely. The maritime insurance markets will immediately skyrocket premiums.
Or pull coverage entirely.
Right. For any vessels entering the region, tankers will be forced to reroute, likely down around the Cape of Good Hope.
Which adds weeks to transit times.
Weeks. The implication here is immediate global energy shocks.
It's staggering.
The fuel powering manufacturing, logistics, and daily life worldwide is now completely tethered to a military standoff.
So you have this profound economic stranglehold happening at sea.
Yes.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the airspace and the ground operations are simultaneously escalating at a ferocious pace.
The pacing is unbelievable.
While Hormuz is being locked down, Israel has drastically intensified its military campaigns on two completely different fronts.
The sheer operational bandwidth required to manage these simultaneous campaigns is staggering.
Right.
We are looking at two highly distinct theaters of war being prosecuted at the exact same time.
Let's break down what the briefing tells us about these two fronts. First, Israel has launched a new wave of airstrikes deep inside the borders of Iran.
Yes.
And at the exact same time they are flying those high-risk sorties, they have expanded a major ground offensive in Lebanon.
Specifically targeting Tehran-backed Hezbollah forces.
Exactly.
The contrast in warfare here is stark.
How so?
Well, on one hand, you have the Israeli Air Force coordinating complex, long-range strike packages, likely utilizing F-35s and advanced munitions to penetrate Iranian airspace.
Very high-tech aerial warfare.
Right. But on the other hand, you have the grueling, brutal reality of a ground incursion in Lebanon.
Which is totally different.
Completely.
Right.
It's defined by close-quarters combat, difficult terrain, and deeply entrenched opposition.
And we are seeing the raw realities of that ground war materializing in the reports today.
Yes, the latest updates are heavy.
Lebanese state media is reporting that an Israeli airstrike hit a residential building in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, the sources note that Israeli ground troops have physically advanced into the southern Lebanese town of Qiyam.
Qiyam is very important.
We are moving from border skirmishes to deep territorial advances here. Why is Qiyam so significant?
It's strategically significant due to its elevation, for one, and its historical context in previous conflicts.
Okay.
Pushing armor and infantry into a fortified area like that indicates Israel's attempting to systematically dismantle Hezbollah's staging grounds and launch infrastructure right near the border.
But if Israel is successfully carrying out these deep penetration airstrikes against Iranian missile sites like we just talked about, wait, let me rephrase that.
Sure.
If they are hitting these sites, How is the Israel Defense Forces simultaneously admitting that the threat level hasn't diminished?
That's the paradox of this specific campaign.
The briefing highlights a very candid assessment from the IDF. They explicitly stated that Iran still retains a significant capacity to launch missile attacks against Israel.
Yes.
So are the airstrikes not working?
It's not necessarily that the strikes are failing. It's more a testament to the sheer depth and redundancy of Iran's missile program.
Depth meaning literally underground.
Literally underground.
Wait.
Over the decades, Tehran has built vast subterranean complexes, so-called missile cities, deep beneath the Zagros Mountains.
Wow.
Hitting surface-level radar installations or command centers is one thing, but neutralizing hardened, underground silos requires highly specialized bunker-busting munitions.
And perfect intelligence.
Exactly, perfect intelligence.
So the IDF's assessment is essentially acknowledging a war of attrition where the knockout blow hasn't landed yet.
That's right. The IDF is signaling to its own population and to the world that despite the intensity of the bombing campaign over the first 5 days, the opposing side's offensive architecture is still largely intact.
So the capacity for a massive ballistic missile retaliation remains on the board,
It very much remains on the board.
which makes the internal political situation in Tehran the ultimate wild card in this conflict right now.
It really is.
We have to look at the leadership vacuum at the center of all this. As the briefings remind us, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed earlier in the week.
In U.S.-Israeli airstrikes on Tehran,
Right.
losing the ultimate arbiter of a nation's military and political strategy in the opening days of a multi-front war is an unprecedented shock to the system.
I can't even imagine the internal chaos.
The entire command and control apparatus has to recalibrate while actively taking fire.
And the logistical realities of that shock are highly visible in the streets right now.
They are.
Iran actually had to postpone Khamenei's state funeral.
That is a massive signal.
State television cited the delay was due to the anticipation of unprecedented turnout.
Right.
You can imagine the security nightmare of trying to organize millions of mourners in the capital city while your airspace is actively contested.
It's a paralyzing scenario. A state funeral of that magnitude is a massive logistical and security undertaking in peacetime.
Right, let alone during a war.
Attempting it during an active bombing campaign invites catastrophic risk.
Yeah.
But the delay of the funeral also underscores the frantic maneuvering happening behind closed doors.
They need a new leader.
Yes, the Assembly of Experts is desperately rushing to appoint a successor to Khamenei.
And that succession process is happening under an explicit, very public threat.
A very severe one.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a stark warning today. He formally vowed to assassinate whoever is chosen to succeed Khamenei.
This is where we cross into entirely uncharted diplomatic territory.
How so?
In traditional conflict theory, even at the absolute height of war, there is usually an implicit understanding that you need an opposing leader left alive.
Sign the treaty.
Exactly. To eventually negotiate terms of surrender or a ceasefire.
Right.
By explicitly vowing to eliminate the next head of state before they are even named, Israel is signaling a total war of decapitation.
And the response from Tehran mirrors that exact level of uncompromising finality.
They are digging in.
Mohammad Mokber, a senior aide to the late Khamenei, made a public declaration today.
What did he say?
He stated that Iran has no intention of negotiating with the United States. And he added that Iran is prepared to sustain this war for as long as we want.
This raises an important question.
Yeah.
How do you de-escalate a conflict when the fundamental mechanisms for diplomacy are non-existent?
I mean, you can't.
You have an Iranian establishment categorically refusing the concept of negotiation, declaring an infinite timeline for the war.
Yeah.
Conversely, you have an Israeli leadership making the assassination of the rival government's top official their stated public policy.
There are no off-ramps left. Every statement, every military maneuver is designed to escalate and expand.
The collapse of diplomatic boundaries is perfectly mirrored by the collapse of geographic boundaries.
That's a great way to put it.
When the rules of engagement vanish, the war bleeds into every available theater. From the skies over Tehran to the shipping lanes of Hormuz, all the way down to the waters of Sri Lanka.
So what does this all mean?
It's a lot to take in.
It is. If we synthesize everything we've looked at from day 5, we are witnessing a localized conflict violently globalizing in real time.
Yeah.
We've seen a U.S. submarine sink an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka. That marks a massive geographical expansion of naval warfare.
Completely unprecedented.
We've seen Iran establish military control over the Strait of Hormuz, effectively putting a chokehold on the arteries of global energy.
Right.
We've seen Israel wage a high-tech air campaign deep inside Iran while simultaneously pushing ground troops block by block into southern Lebanon.
Two massive fronts.
We've seen the IDF candidly admit that Iran's ballistic missile threat remains highly potent despite the bombardments.
The threat is still there.
And politically, we are watching a regime navigate a postponed state funeral and a frantic succession crisis, while their adversaries openly vow to assassinate their next leader.
And they themselves vow a war without end or negotiation.
It is a profound realignment of global stability occurring in a matter of hours.
It really is. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building directly on the logistics of what we saw in the Indian Ocean today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think back to the Sri Lanka Navy.
The rescue operation.
Yes. A completely uninvolved neutral force was suddenly thrust into the middle of a superpower conflict.
Forced to respond.
Forced to execute a complex mass rescue operation of foreign sailors in their own waters.
Yeah.
If the shockwaves of this war have already hit the shores of the wider Indian Ocean by day 5, how long before other neutral nations bordering these critical sea lanes are forced to make an impossible choice?
That is the question.
How long before countries just trying to protect their own maritime borders find themselves inextricably pulled into the crossfire of a war they have absolutely nothing to do with?
That is the pivotal question as this conflict continues to erase boundaries. Thank you for sitting down with us today to navigate this.
Always glad to be here.
We know the sheer volume of geopolitical shifts happening right now can be overwhelming for you listening.
It's a lot to process.
But taking the time to parse the facts, understand the logistics, and look at the broader implications is essential. Keep asking the hard questions, and we'll be right here to deep dive into the next.
Okay, one question for you. How will the reported sinking of an Iranian warship near Sri Lanka by a US submarine reshape global naval security dynamics, especially in the Indian Ocean region where multiple superpowers maintain strategic interest? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.